Hello and welcome to our weekly Torah Talk. Our guest today is Rabbi Brad Hirschfield, an author and the president of KLAL, the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership. Thank you for being with us, Rabbi.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
Our Parashat this week is Eikev from the book of Devarim. In this Parsha, Moses keeps talking to the people, rebuking them for their failings in the desert, the worship of the golden calf, the rebellion of Korach, the sin of the spies, and he famously describes this is how it begins. והיה עקב תשמעון את המשפטים האלה ושמרתם ועשיתם אותם ושמר אדוני אלוהיך לך את הברית ואת החסד אשר נשבע לאבותיך. And it will be because you will heed these ordinances and keep them and perform that the Lord your God will keep for you the covenant and the kindness that he swore to your forefathers. So what we have here is a case of conditional promise.
Yeah, look, Shmuel, I think it's both conditional and non-conditional. That key phrase, et habrit ve'et hachesed, it's two-sided, right? There is definitely a brit, a covenant, and a covenant is just fancy language for a deal. The deal is between God and this Jewish people, and that's definitely, there's a conditional element. Then there's also this notion of chesed, of an almost unconditional love. A kind of loving kindness that says the partners are willing to go beyond the bounds of the deal. And I think that's a really critical insight at this particular moment in the story of God, in the story of Moshe, in the story of the Jewish people as a whole. There's an and by the way, I should say the story of the Jewish people right now at this moment in human history.
Right.
Because we've got a lot of people who are great at the notion of this is a relationship based on a deal. Here are the rules. You do X, I'll do Y. And if anyone violates anything, as either partner understands it, blow up the whole thing. And those people tend to be very suspicious of unconditional love. They tend to be very uncertain about the notion that a relationship can be sustained with that kind of, you know why I love you? Because I love you. And actually, whatever rules there are, they're not so important to me. The flip side is people who are so committed to that kind of love, they think you can sustain relationship with no norms whatsoever. It turns out that the best and strongest relationships between the God you may or may not believe in and the people you may or may not like, or in our own lives, in our own relationships, seems to require that combination of brit and chesed, of norms that are really conditional, of commitments we make to each other, and promise we're going to uphold them, and then also the understanding that, you know what, even when we fall short, we're going to be there for each other.
Well, speaking about the promise, later in the Parsha, when Moses speaks about the land of Israel, or the land of Canaan, he tells the people, not because of your righteousness or because of the honesty of your heart do you come to possess this land, but because of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. But the next pasuk says, you shall know that not because of your righteousness the Lord your God gives you this land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people. So we have two kinds of promises here. In one sentence, he tells them that the promise will be kept because of the wickedness of other people. But on the other hand, earlier in the Parsha, he tells them, well, it's because I promised the land to your forefathers. So right, which is it?
What's going on here? It's a fair question. I think it's actually, this is the mirror in narrative of the claim Brit and Chesed. Right? Because what Moshe says to the people is, don't tell yourselves it's because of our moral superiority that we're going to inherit this land. Right? You never command people to do that which they aren't already doing. Which means the notion that somehow we are morally superior is not new to this generation of Jews. Apparently, Bnei Israel in the desert were already telling themselves, we will get this land because we are so much better than the people who are already here. How many times do we hear that story today?
Right.
And Moshe says, don't you dare say that to yourself. In fact, the Mefarshim, the commentators, want to point out, it may be true, Rashi and Rashbam in particular, that the Jewish people in that time was morally superior to their neighbors. In fact, they say for sure. I'm saying maybe. But that can't be the reason why they inherit the land. And it's very important. The idea that we are somehow better than may be true. It may even be necessary, but it is not a sufficient claim for inheriting the land. Not then, not now. We hear that claim all the time. As long as we're better than our neighbors, then and anything can be justified that way. And from the very beginning, we're told, that's insane. That's not a justification for inheriting anything. You don't inherit because you're better than who may be at hand. Right? That's not a legitimate reason. It's a necessary but insufficient condition. Now, Moshe then comes and says, you know what? You are, in fact, better than the people you live amongst. But that's not why you're inheriting this land. You're inheriting this land because we've had a long relationship that brings you to this place. And I think this is a really critical insight, probably more now as Jews have more power than then, to stop playing the game of as long as we're better than the people we like least, that makes us good enough. And Moshe says to the people, you are insane if you believe that.
But he doesn't tell them here. He doesn't tell them in this parsha that if they misbehave, they will be forced out of the land.
No, it does suggest that actually, because, and we get it more. We get two formulations of that claim that's made in Dvarim in multiple places, including other places in this Parashat, and then also in Sefer Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus, for different reasons, but they're related. For Sefer Dvarim, for the book of Deuteronomy, it's all about the people being kadosh, right? The people have to be a holy nation. And if they are, in fact, a holy nation, then they will participate in this multi-generational promise and can inherit the land. For Sefer Vayikra, most aggressively in Perek Yud in chapter 18, we're told the land will literally vomit you out if you don't behave appropriately, as it vomited out its past inhabitants. In other words, there's nothing special about you Jews, about Bnei Israel. In fact, the land itself is kadosh. And if you don't treat it with kedusha, then whatever claims you think you have are over. So it turns out, both for historical purposes and almost mystical purposes, the one argument the Torah takes great pains to deconstruct is the notion of a self-satisfied Bnei Israel, looking around at the world and saying, well, we're better than everyone else, and therefore we can justify anything. In fact, this is just the opposite. It says that, yes, this is a multi-generational promise, and it is here for you. It is here for us. But the justification for it is that we are, in fact, holding up our end of the deal, not simply walking around proud that we are at least a little better than the worst people in the world. If, in fact, that's the argument, you may as well shut down the whole project.
Rabbi Hirschfield, thank you so much, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.